and I'm an elementary school teacher, mostly taught in DC for 12 years, teaching 2nd grade and 5th grade. I just moved to Austin, Texas last year, where I have not been a teacher. So I'm also not an academic, but if somebody wants to turn ideas of this conversation into a real study, that would be great. So I'm going to start a discussion of who would win if educational LARP battled Dorothy Heathcote's Mantle of the Expert. Who knows Dorothy, the Mantle of the Expert? I mean, I was having a dinner party, by anybody, I would invite. So perhaps, I am entering back into the classroom teaching 5th grade in Austin next year, so perhaps this could become more of an academic study when I have some subjects in front of me. So while I was underemployed and doing a lot of reading in the late summer and early fall, I was looking for a publisher that could possibly help me publish these almost 40 Edu-Larps I've created for elementary school, and came across old biographies and books about and by Dorothy Heathcote, who is an educator and education professor in England, starting in the 60s, and she was trained as an actress, wanting to become famous, but that didn't happen, and she ended up using what she learned about drama to teach children and to teach educators to use drama in their teaching. So she created Teacher Enroll, a dramatic tool that lots of teachers use, Mantle of the Expert, which I'll explain, and what she calls process drama. So kids are in this story, and the learning happens during this process of creating the drama together. So I pitted a founder of the Danish LARP school to represent Edu-Larp, but it could have been many people here, against Dorothy in this battle that happened in my mind while I did all of this reading over the past 10 months. So by Edu-Larp, when I teach teachers how to use LARP for their educational purposes, and when I create my own LARPs for the classroom, I start with my learning objective and then just brainstorm a story, a world, a conflict that can happen, characters, whether I create them, they're co-created with my students, or if I'm giving students free rein to create their own characters in this world. I'll use some game mechanics, rules, and meta techniques, and when I'm creating these Edu-Larps, if I have something very specific in terms of content I'd like to teach, I'll use heavier game mechanics and rules. Or if I have a rambunctious group of children, I really pack in the rules so they're limited in what they can do while they're improvising. Sometimes we have props and costumes. Of course, we need to improvise and make sure teachers know that we need to workshop in the beginning, whether that's about characters, the story, the educational content, so they're prepared to play, and then debrief the experience, or else there is no educational value. As I did my reading about Mantle of the Expert, I saw that the route to creating the drama in this technique started with a theme, then what they call the overview of learning, brainstorming interesting aspects of that, some inquiry questions that are going to guide the process drama, then create this narrative, the story. In the Mantle of the Expert, the teacher creates this world and this narrative, and the children are always the experts. So there was video of Dorothy Heathcote showing off this technique where she is the boss of a boot factory, and all of the kids are expert boot makers. And they have a client they're working for, I think their customers, I can't remember, and then there's a commission, something they have to do. So it makes a very focused That's maybe sometimes limited, but even if the kids know nothing about the subject, just pitting them as the experts can engage them into the learning. They also consider other points of view in the story, list out a list of tasks that they'll go through in this process drama over the course of these days. Of course, look into the curriculum, why are you doing this in school, resources you need, and then list out all of the steps that will happen, and some of the scripts even have dialogue that the teacher in a role, like Dorothy was sometimes playing the boss of the factory, sometimes playing a customer. She's going in and out of herself as the teacher, and then into many different roles. When I teach teachers how to use educational LARP and tell them it's not a scary thing, you can do it and don't change anything that you already do. I show them that your workshop is really just you're teaching content, maybe you gotta practice some improv and learn your characters, or maybe you're reviewing content to get ready for the story. Your LARP might be a hook into a new topic. You're learning about Civil War, you know nothing about it. You can have a little LARP that engages kids, but they don't need to know any content yet. Maybe you're at the end of a unit of study and it's a culminating celebration. Kids know they're working up to this role play. Maybe you're using as an assessment of what are they doing in character, and you're having a checklist to see what the kids can actually do. You could problem solve, create a shared experience. Sometimes I use LARP in the classroom as a collective text. Maybe we'll read a novel together, but we can also be in the novel and refer back to that in our learning. And then at the end, you want to debrief. That could be where you assess as well and reflect, analyze what happened in the story, make connections to other content, or reteach something you noticed in the role play that they didn't quite understand. So I tell teachers, keep doing what you're doing and see where you can insert a LARP experience. In my studying of Mantle of the Expert, I saw this planning sheet, and it seems more linear to me. Like before, you just plan these steps out, and then you march through them. And one more visual example of this is here is a LARP about westward expansion, where I read the kids an introduction about in 1789, the United States is a young nation, blah, blah, blah. Travel back to and speed through the 1800s to experience the fight for land in the territories that would become the United States of America. So in starting this, I don't really know what's going to happen. I gave them all these characters that actually existed and participated or fought against westward expansion. And we'll see what happens. In the Mantle of the Expert, to me, it seems like you kind of know where you're leading kids, and again, it seems much more linear in what happens. So I'm going to compare Edu-Larp and Mantle of the Expert based on these three criteria. Which one engage students better? Which model is better for actual academic learning and assessment of that learning, since that's the thing that American schools really care about these days? And which one is better in terms of teacher preparation? Like, can teachers actually learn it fast and do it well? So, for student engagement, I wanted to have subtopics of the age and developmental level, student participation, and then which one is creating community better. In terms of age, this isn't scientific at all, but in my observations, in my reading, I think Mantle of the Expert works really well with pre-K and primary age students because it's more guided and there are less rules. But as kids get older, I can see that it's more developmentally appropriate for them to use Edu-Larp. And there are lots of entry points into participation in Mantle of the Expert. I mean, in Edu-Larp, in terms of participation, many different characters. It's easy for me to differentiate instruction and tasks for kids to do. And with Edu-Larp and Mantle of the Expert, all of the kids are the experts together, and they're all doing the same tasks at the same time. However, I can see in building community, Mantle of the Expert kids are really, they don't start doing any tasks until the teacher has brought the kids emotionally into the story to care about the topic and the problem that they're solving for. Here's a picture of my 5th graders last year in a LARP called the Union of Wolves, which was a metaphorical take on the problems that the North and South faced leading up to the Civil War. So they had different dens of wolves that came at their problem in their forest community from different perspectives. So I can see here that there were many things that they were doing. They have props, they're being active. If I did the same kind of content with Mantle of the Expert, knowing the kids in that class, I'm not sure that I would have had a total involvement. Here is a Mantle of the Expert example of kids who read the story about bears, and the bears were held captive in a circus or something as dancing bears, and kids thought that that was just unjust and that they were going to do something about it, break those bears free. So all of the play happens in their mind, and if the teacher can get kids to really care about that topic, then that could clearly work. So I think that Mantle of the Expert wins with building community here, according to me, but I think overall, Edu-Larp is the winner of student engagement. For learning and assessment, I have these main categories. I have academic focus, teaching SEL skills, maximizing instructional time, making learning visible, and then having an integrated curriculum, and then that ability to assess. You're able to focus on academic content with both techniques. I think it just depends on your planning. Teaching and learning social emotional learning skills. I can see since emotion drives Mantle of the Expert work, I think that it lends itself better to the SEL work. And maximizing instructional time. If you do a Mantle of the Expert plan, you need many, many days to move through that process drama. So since you're supposed to jam in a ton of learning in every minute in teaching and learning in schools these days, it's easier, I think, to do that with an Edu-Larp, to just design a one-time shot LARP to maximize that instructional time. Here is a pre and post test for a LARP about teaching direct versus representative democracy, and kids played orcs that battled out in the field outside of the school. And before we played orcs living under different kinds of democracy battling, I gave kids a pre-test to see if they understood anything about the Federalist and Anti-Federalist influence on types of democracy, and then after we LARPed. So I was able to assess, but I think it didn't transfer past that unit of study because it was a one-shot LARP that we didn't continue reflecting on. We also didn't make our learning visible here. We went and played in the field and had great discussions, but we didn't make anything that let kids hold on to that learning. I think Mantle of the Expert, they're making artifacts all along their process drama that are visible and all around them. Sometimes we do that with an Edu-Larp, but it's not always the case. It's more we are in the action. And so I think Mantle of the Expert wins here. In terms of teacher preparation, I think about this a lot because I'm not just teaching now. I'm working as an education consultant and coach with school districts and school teams doing school redesign. And they're dreaming up these big ideas for deeper learning, but then they need to remember that they have to train their staff to do all of the things they want to implement. So in terms of required professional development, I think since there are a few different categories of creating a LARP, and you can just brainstorm for each of them, it's easier for teachers to learn how to do that. Even me reading a ton about Mantle of the Expert, I feel unprepared to try one out because of all of the pieces involved in creating a Mantle of the Expert plan. This is somebody's plan. When I teach teachers, I just tell them, have your educational objective in mind. Maybe you want to have it be a hook into your new content, practice what you're already doing in your use it as a performance assessment, and then just knock in your characters you're setting, your game mechanics. So the lesson planning load seems really big in terms of preparing for a process drama or mental of the expert plan. And classroom management, however, I would give points to mental of the expert because we're all doing the same thing at the same time as experts in a collective. So I think that Edu-Larp is easier for teachers to prepare and learn about. In conclusion, I think Edu-Larp is the winner. And recommendations, I would teach teachers about educational art first, but include both methods in teacher instruction and professional development. And for me, I will study many more resources and articles to be better prepared to use Mantle of the expert. And I will do it